Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive existential question. Why do some societies endure while others just completely collapse? We'll be diving into Abu Yarub al-Marzuki's profound philosophical treatise on exactly what it takes for human civilizations to survive and thrive. He argues that the answer lies in a very specific, delicate balance, and, as you'll see, he outlines a comprehensive framework for how humanity can literally avoid its own destruction. Let's get right into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the decline of civilizations, then look at the 2 pillars of survival, followed by the 5 criteria to overcome loss. After that, we'll dive into the necessity of freedom, and finally, wrap up with human effort and divine law. So, Section 1, the decline of civilizations. Understanding the existential threat. Now, we begin with a core problem rooted in the theories of the 14th century historian Ibn Khaldun, the ultimate decline of societies that ignore the balance between the seen and the unseen worlds. Consider this central question. What actually connects the history of religion with the history of scientific knowledge? Think about it like a giant intergenerational relay race. Neither science nor religion starts from scratch with each generation, right? They both rely on continuous cross-pollination across different successive civilizations. They share this fundamental human drive, this unyielding desire to go beyond the immediate physical world to understand the deeper truths behind our existence. And that brings us to the crux of the problem, a concept called khusr, which translates to loss. Al-Marzuki argues that when a civilization becomes hyper-focused purely on earthly material accumulation, building wealth, extracting resources, expanding territories, and completely forgets its spiritual grounding or critical awareness, it effectively seals its own doom. It's this illusion of progress that actually leads to absolute, complete decline. Moving on to Section 2, the 2 pillars of survival, balancing the material and the spiritual. To actually survive, we first have to balance an essential dichotomy. On one hand, we have our internal, theoretical knowledge. This is our vision and our beliefs, basically connecting our origins to our cognitive goals. But belief alone simply isn't enough, is it? On the other hand, it has to be balanced by practical action. This is our work, our laws, the tangible ways we connect what currently exists to what we practically desire. A surviving civilization seamlessly connects these internal ideals with external realities. This balance also extends to how we accumulate value as a society. A surviving civilization absolutely must master nature. We have to satisfy our physical needs and build material wealth. That's undeniably essential for sure. But simultaneously, we must engage in spiritual accumulation, which al-Marzuki calls mastering history. This means satisfying our spiritual needs and building a rich moral heritage. If you only have one without the other, the whole structure basically collapses like a house of cards. So, what does true survival actually require? The source text calls it istikhlaf, or stewardship. Think of this as the ultimate counterweight to that concept of khusr, or loss we just discussed. Stewardship is all about fulfilling spiritual needs and achieving truthful communication. It's meant to liberate humanity from the tyranny of history and corruption. Basically, it's about taking responsible care of both the earth and human morality. Which brings us to Section 3, 5 criteria to overcome loss, the formula derived from Surah Al-Asr. To escape civilizational loss, al-Marzuki provides a definitive 5-step formula drawn directly from this foundational chapter of the Quran. Notice how these steps logically progress. It doesn't start with action, it starts with mindset. First, an awareness of loss and our limits. Second, faith in the unseen. Third, righteous deeds. Fourth, enjoining truth. And fifth, enjoining patience. You go from basic self-awareness that we don't know everything, right into moral action, culminating in the continuous social struggle for truth and patience. Okay, let's dive deeper into what these steps actually require in practice. The very first hurdle is checking our own ego at the door, abandoning the illusion that humans have absolute godlike control over nature. Once we do that, we can use righteous deeds as our singular moral standard for action. But pay close attention to these last 2 points. We must engage in ijtihad, which is an active, intellectual effort to seek the truth. And then we engage in jihad, which in this philosophical context means the profound, patient struggle to actually realize and apply that truth in a deeply flawed world. Section 4, the necessity of freedom. Why compulsion negates true belief. Now, for any of those criteria to actually work, they require a specific environment. Al-Marzuki takes a very firm philosophical stance here. As the text states, Islam does not impose belief, because preserving multiplicity through competing in good deeds requires freedom from compulsion. Basically, genuine faith simply cannot exist under tyranny. Why? Because the entire goal is to preserve a multiplicity of ideas so communities can actively compete in doing good deeds. You absolutely cannot have genuine competition or sincere belief if people are being forced into it. The crucial point here is that human beings are fundamentally incapable of judging true internal sincerity. The ultimate judgment of faith is deferred entirely to the day of judgment, because only the Creator knows the sincere secrets of the human heart. So, human societies must allow for religious multiplicity. Society's role isn't to police internal belief, but to protect the freedom that allows individuals to genuinely seek the truth on their own terms. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Human Effort and Divine Law, the matrix of Islamic jurisprudence. Let's see how all of this builds into the societal rules that govern daily life. Human responsibility isn't just black and white. It exists across a deeply nuanced spectrum. At the primary level, you have actions that are explicitly mandatory or strictly forbidden. But then you have a secondary layer of things that are simply recommended or disliked. And crucially, at the bottom, you have this neutral zone, the permissible. This is where there's no explicit text or where extreme necessity allows for flexibility. This matrix leaves massive room for human interpretation and intellectual effort. This unique legal framework relies heavily on a partnership. On one side, you have divine legislation. These are the direct rules setting the ultimate standards and unmovable moral ideals. On the other side, you have human legislation. Because real-world situations change and evolve constantly, human beings are required to use sincere interpretation or ijtihad to apply those indirect rules to modern problems. It's an active, continuous partnership between divine ideals and human intellect. So, what does this all mean in practice? Well, our spiritual creed deals with the infinite, unseen, things we cannot measure, which relies heavily on that continuous intellectual effort, or ijtihad. Conversely, our practical laws, the Sharia, rely on jihad, or struggle, to govern practical, measurable exchanges. Think of it using the metaphor of a perfectly balanced scale for justice. And underpinning all of this is the fundamental rule of moral communication, treating others exactly as you wish to be treated. This is what keeps communication honest and free from corruption. As we conclude this explainer, we are left with Al-Marzuki's ultimate probing challenge. We've seen the mechanics of how civilizations rise through balanced stewardship and fall through purely material obsession. So the question remains for us today: will we embrace both the mastery of nature and the stewardship of history, or will we succumb to civilizational loss? Are we, right now, repeating the very same historical mistakes that inevitably lead to collapse? It's a massive question that demands our attention, and I encourage you to think deeply about where we currently stand on that scale. Thanks so much for joining me.